Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Reese, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Morning, Mary. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm very interested in our conversation today for a variety of reasons, but you have been in the Ombuds world for quite some time, and we're going to talk about all things Ombuds. But before we get to that, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Oh my gosh, first job I had as a young person. So we're going to go back decades. I was 16, maybe 17 back in high school. And back then, this is the 90s. For those of us that are young listening to this, we had something called newspapers. And if someone needed a job or wanted to hire someone, you put the announcement in the newspaper. And so I saw this little blurb for, someone needing someone to work at a bookstore. Back then we had mom and pop bookstores, when people used to read books. And so I applied and I think I got the job immediately. And so it was really exciting because it was a little tiny hole in the wall bookstore that had mainly paperbacks, magazines, and newspapers. They would get the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. There'd be like the morning, evening edition. And so that was my first job. And the first job I got fired from.
Oh no.
Because there
What
was a
happened?
conflict. Yeah, there was an issue. Looking back, again, I was only 16, 17, didn't really think it through. So I got the job, but had no transportation. This bookstore was about, I don't know, probably 3 miles from home. So I'm like, I could walk, probably an hour, or I can take the bus, but the bus didn't stop close enough. So it was a combination of both. I take the bus, walk probably 20 minutes, and that made me late. And so I was consistently, 10, 30 minutes. One time I think it was 40 minutes and, but didn't seem to be an issue till one day I walked in and supervisor manager who, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was a great job because it paid more than minimum wage, which back then for a 16, 17-year-old was quite a bit. But he's like, go get your paycheck. It's in the back. And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm letting you go. You're late too often. And so that was my first taste of working and being in the real world of, wait a minute, you can just let me go and no conversation, no dialogue, no questions. And so I took my paycheck and probably cried back home.
It's interesting that you just said it wasn't a problem. You're chronically late. It wasn't a problem until it was, right?
Right.
So had they not had conversations like, this is not sustainable, you're going to have to be here on time, did any of that transpire?
No, looking back with the lens of an ombuds mediator, conflict coach, I can say, there were all these moments that if I'd known better, I could have said, let's talk about my situation. I'm going to do my best, but, can we work on my schedule, maybe get it shifted or something? But no, there were no conversations about expectations, Reese. I need you here at a certain time. And in my little mind back then, it was simply like, okay, I'm in charge of opening the store and closing the store at times. And, I had to be there by, I don't know, 6:37 in the morning on Sundays because you got to bring the newspapers in. And so I thought I was doing my job. And yes, maybe I was late a few minutes, but, it was reflected in the paycheck, right? I clocked in at 7:30 versus 7:15. But again, no conversations.
That is so interesting. I mean, time, I'm sure you run across this quite a bit, but timeliness, how important it is. If you're 15 minutes late, are you even late? If you're not 15 minutes early, are you on time? I mean, people just have such wildly different expectations about how important it is and what it means. And I hear you saying, right, well, you made up for it. Like, well, you just weren't paid for that time. So, and nobody said anything. So all's good.
Yeah. Again, in my mind, I thought everything is going well. And so I was surprised, shocked. And yes, now as an Ombuds facilitator, people do come in and sometimes time is a challenge for someone, supervisor, manager, leader, he, she, they really feel strongly, I want you in at a specific time, 8 o'clock, you leave at 5 o'clock, you get your lunch, and they follow those labor guidelines. Other folks are, I'm not kidding. I've had people in the past, he, she, they, who reach out and say, Reese, I've got a challenge. I've got an employee. I've not seen them for 2, maybe 3 weeks now.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wait a minute. And you're the supervisor? And have you reached out to them? Yeah, but they haven't replied. And so there's, I call it Goldilocks, Mary, that sustainable, right, healthy balance of not too hard, soft, not too cold, hard, soft. And, what's that happy balance where in the workplace we can get the job done, and at the same time we factor in the needs of the individual.
Mhm.
It's not sustainable,
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. So you had this job and you were let go. What happened next? And tell us how you got to your first professional job.
yeah. So I worked a bunch of little jobs in high school. I was at a yogurt shop, one of the first serve yourself yogurt places, which um, nowadays you go to a lot of stores and you can serve yourself ice cream or yogurt. And then I think one summer I worked at another job I got fired from. That was the last job. So I've been fired 2 times. It was at a burger place, Carl's Jr. And what's interesting, same thing happened in a way that supervisor was like, okay, you're going to come in every Thursday by, I don't know, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, back in the break room. I'm going to put the schedule for the next week. You're responsible for making note of it. Thursday, 1 o'clock. And so I remember going in and looking at the calendar and thinking, oh, at the schedule, and thinking, I'm not scheduled till like Wednesday. I'm like, that's like 4 days off. And so, of course, I did not report to work. And then I show up on a Wednesday or whatever the day was, and manager's like, where you been? And he used some pretty profane language I won't repeat now. And I'm like, I've been at home. It's like, I've been trying to call you and connect with you. Um, and so got let go from that job. But then I started getting a little smarter, thinking at some level, maybe communication works, and maybe double checking and ensuring that, okay, did I hear what I think I heard? And let me double check that, we're communicating. And so, um, what ended up happening as far as this field of conflict mediation, I've been, oh my gosh, an ombuds 25 years now.
Hmm.
And what happened, Mary, was when I was an undergrad, I was at Pepperdine, which is in Malibu, Southern
Mhm.
California, gorgeous place. And I held this what I call hallucination belief that I was going to go to law school, which I did. But in my mind, I thought, oh, I'm going to go to Pepperdine Law. They have a law school, perfect, nice segue. And so I was working at the law library, and I learned that there was this institute of conflict management, the Strauss Institute of Dispute Resolution, which back in the 90s was only one of 2 or 3 programs in the whole nation on mediation. I think it was Harvard, the program on negotiation, and some other institution. Um, so I thought, maybe if I take some classes, and what is this meditation? I don't know what it is, but maybe I can get the credits so that I can get out of law school sooner. And in my mind, I'm like, yes, I want that because law school is like 3 years. Maybe I can do this in 2 years and I can make money and all the things I see on TV, LA Law, I can achieve. And so I took this class in what I thought was meditation mediation. I'm like, I don't care. I just want the units, the credits. And real quick, what happened was we went around the room introducing ourselves. And I was the youngest person there. I was like 20, 21. Everyone's probably twice my age, gray haired. And there was one gentleman who was in tears almost because he hated the work he did
Hmm.
as a family law attorney. And he's like, I don't like the clients. I'm stressed out. He acknowledged, shared how he was on his second or third divorce himself. And I thought, maybe I'm going in the wrong field
Mhm.
because what he said that stuck with me was, but this mediation stuff feels like home.
Hmm.
And I thought, what does that mean? But something about the way he said it was about having hope and maybe peace. And I'm like, I got to pay more attention. Okay, what is this mediation stuff? And hence the little journey began. That's the origin story. I thought, okay, this feels more comfortable for me. I'm not adversarial. I'm one of those folks that I want everyone to be as happy as possible. And so as I learned more about the field, I thought, okay, this saves time, money, energy. It really gets to the root, the needs. What do people really need? And so I got a bunch of mediation training back then from any community center place that would offer mediation and exchange. You mediated so many cases. So I did a lot of work with the Superior Court in Southern California, LA Superior Court. Did a bunch of landlord-tenant mediation, roommate situations, just about everything. And then one day, not a newspaper, by then it was late 90s. So we had something called monster.com. I think
Mhm.
they're out there on the web. And they put little job postings. And there was a job posting for an ombuds. And I'm like, never heard of that word. And I thought, wait a minute, I think in one of my textbooks from Pepperdine, it mentioned literally, there was like one little paragraph. And I'm like, wait a minute, I kind of know this because an ombuds is informal, mediator is informal. Ombuds is confidential, mediator is confidential. Ombuds is impartial, mediator is impartial. Now there's this independence piece, which is different. And so I wasn't familiar with that, but I'm like, but I think I'm qualified. So I applied, did not get the job. Got the job the second time around 2 years later. There's a whole story with that, but that's the origin story, Mary. That's how it all began. And 25 years later, still loving it, enjoying it.
That's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
a couple of things let's unpack. I'm not sure that everyone listening knows much about mediation. So, let's start there. Tell people about, I mean, you already just did a little bit, but if somebody were to go into mediation or
Yeah.
experience mediation, what is that really about?
Yeah. The classic way of explaining this is I ask folks, imagine, close your eyes, imagine a spectrum, kind of a little bridge. And on one end, you've got different ways of resolving, managing conflict. And then at the other end, you've got another different way of resolving conflict. What does that mean? On one end, if you have an issue, problem, challenge, what do we do typically? And that is, well, we kind of sit with it, right? We kind of think about it internally, we reflect on it. Sometimes we talk to our trusted friends, colleagues, partners. We go to our spouse, our friends, and say, I'm kind of struggling with this. I've got a client, or this is going on. And then we venture into, as you move along that spectrum, into the professional realm of like, maybe I should talk to a professional about this. If it's more of an emotional mental, I'm like, oh, there's therapy. You can connect with a counselor. If it's more of a relational, then a mediator. Mediation is a great forum where you talk to basically what I call a conflict coach. And you explain, here's the situation, help me navigate this. And that's what mediation is. And then the mediator hopefully at some point says, Jack, it sounds like you've got a challenge with Diane. And would you be open to sitting down and me facilitating that conversation with Diane? It is voluntary. That's a critical component. It's got to be voluntary. And Diane's got to, agree to it. And I don't force a solution. I'm not a judge as a mediator. I'm not an arbitrator. Sometimes folks get them confused because there's different modalities or ways of practicing mediation. So that's what mediation is. And then if you get a little more formal structure, then you can go to an arbitrator where someone says, I want someone to decide. And it's like, well, we actually have private judges out there that if you submit your grievance and the other party agrees, it's voluntary or contractual, then the arbitrator has that power. And then there's a judge. You can go to a judge, he, she, they, formal public system. So that's how I explain mediation to folks is, think of it as a trained professional helping two or more people, sometimes it's multiple people, come to a better understanding, resolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people typically, if they're going to have experience with a mediator, it's probably going to be like civil or family. a mediator. But workplace mediation, it's similar in many ways, and it's when there are something going on at work and people need that third party, that neutral third party, and as you mentioned, in a confidential, informal. So typically, I mean, at a university, you're not giving notice to the university, but it's a real way for people to work out their problems with
Exactly.
each other. That is still within their control, not giving it to somebody else, so they can find a durable solution to move forward, to
Right.
find that path to be able to work with that other person.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I came across mediation, I'm in my second part of my career of my life, and the ombuds world, it was like this wonderful, epiphany. Like this is something that people do. This is something that I want to do. But you found it almost right away, thinking you wanted to be a lawyer and then going in this other route of conflict resolution. So tell us about ombudsing. So while many people have had experience with mediators, many people don't know what an ombuds is, and specifically an organizational ombuds.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so when I did do mediations, folks would say, what is that? And I would have to explain. And so I would tell folks, it's a small field, it's a niche. And then when I became an ombuds, even smaller niche,
Right.
especially with the kooky word or unfamiliar word,
Cookie,
ombuds.
I like that. It is a very unfamiliar cookie
Yeah.
word.
Folks say, is that an acronym? What is it? And
Right.
actually, when I first started, I remember thinking we got to, as a profession, come up with a better term,
Mhm.
conflict coach or something that explains what we mean. But it's a Swedish word, ombudsman, from back in the day, and I won't go into the history of it. Um, but nowadays I tell folks, how. Here's my elevator pitch to people. By the way, I ask them, how there's conflict in the workplace. And typically, I'm like, just think about the last situation you experienced or saw a close colleague, Jack or Diane. Those are my default names. And how did they handle that? Because either it worked out or it didn't. And so an ombuds is a designated, impartial, confidential, informal person in an institution that can be a resource for people to navigate those challenging situations. And then I'll end with the questions. Like, that's something you think might be helpful, in your situation or any conflicts, you want to send my way. Um, oh my gosh, I think I strayed from the question, Mary. What was the
No,
question?
that was it. What is an ombuds?
What's an ombuds? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about the conflict coach, there to help you think things through. If
Mhm.
it's one line, it's like, how we get stuck sometimes. We've all been there.
Mhm. Right.
Ombuds can help us get unstuck by helping us think through options, weighing different situations, outcomes, and then you decide what, if anything, to do.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great explanation. So you have been in this relatively new field for 25 years. I
Right.
mean, so you've been in it for quite some time. So thinking about you as an ombuds professional 25 years ago when you started versus where you are now, what what have you seen in yourself and in the profession change to serve visitors, to serve institutions, to help bring about
Right.
healthy work environments?
Yeah. So two things. So one, in the profession, I believe it's evolved. We're more consistent, meaning when I started in 2001, actually, and I remember the day, because it was the day before 9/11. And so I believe it was a Monday. I want to say 9/11 was on a Tuesday. And so it was that week. But back then, we did not have what we now call IOA, the International Ombuds Association. That's the main, think of ABA, SHRM. For ombuds, it's IOA, or one of the big ones, IOA. Um, and so before that, we had different standards and different way of practicing. So we didn't have best practices or standards. And I remember a mentor of mine who was one of the first original ombuds back in the 60s, who didn't like standards. They're like, no, I just do my job. And however I get my job done, that's how I do my job. And used some pretty coarse language because his focus was on how do I help this person? Maybe even in his case, advocate for them,
Hmm.
which is different than you had asked, what is his organizational ombuds? And so there are different types, classical ombuds and some that are appointed by legislatures and or the
Mhm.
state governmental type. There are some in like, caregiving situation that are more advocate patient type ombuds. But what we mean by organizational ombuds, it's those ombuds located within an institution, organization, could be higher ed, could be a corporation, a nonprofit. So that's what I am, an organizational ombuds. But going back to the question one, the professions become more professionalized. We now have certification, more consistency. Personally, individually, there's also been that maturity. I remember thinking, I can do this job. I've been a mediator, but then I've done mediations and done it for 2, 3 years, and and I really thought, okay, I know I can do this job. Um, Not fully realizing, oh, there's some recurring themes, challenges that will happen working with different leaders
Hmm.
and different personalities and different offices. And one of the things I took for granted, Mary, was believing, oh, because the institution has an ombuds, everybody knows what that means. When I reach out to Jack or Diane, the leader, and say, hey, here's some feedback, they're going to be open to it. And they're going to sit down with me and it's going to be a pleasant conversation. And so I was taken a little aback at times when the leader person manager would say, like, well, who the heck do you think you are?
Mhm.
Like, who appointed you, kind of judge? And I'm like, oh, I'm not being a judge. I'm just, these are observations. And so learning that being an ombuds is sometimes we need to be more than just ombuds. We need to also be, in a way, people that marketers and
Mhm.
salespeople in a way,
Mhm.
and that we're communicating with folks and letting them know, like, here's what we do, and here's the benefit and the service we offer. And if you manage an office as an ombuds, you have typically a budget, so you have to be a little financial guru and take care of that budget and be a good steward. Maybe you have people you supervise, and so you have to be a good supervisor leader yourself, set the standard. And so there's been that evolution. And 25 years later, real quick, Mary, I've been in like, oh my gosh, I think 5 or 6 different institutions: academic, corporation, hybrid, non-governmental, meaning nonprofit, and governmental. So 5 different. And what that means is different cultures, different mission purposes. But what I soon noticed was conflict stays the same. Meaning after UCLA, I went to a place called Sandia National Labs. It's an engineering lab. They literally make things that go boom. They do a lot of homeland security, cybersecurity, um, things that keep the nation safe. Um, and when I first went there, I was still, young enough where I'm like, am I going to succeed here? Because I know nothing about science. I'm curious about it, and I'm not an engineer. I remember sitting down with people and they're talking about things. I'm like, oh my gosh, 80% of it's going over my head. But the moment they would say, I felt so disrespected, or that it didn't matter, or my feedback, right, got called out, I'm like, ooh, that I can relate to. And so, again, no matter where we serve, where we work, at the end of the day, we all have the same basic human needs in the workplace.
Yeah, I have that experience as well. And like with mediators, especially at work, though sometimes they'll put a call out. I work with this other organization in London, and they'll put a call out, does anybody have an experience with this or with that? And I understand why a work environment, a workplace would want somebody who's familiar with the type of work. It's a kind of like they think that's necessary, but it largely is not. It's the human, right? People are people, conflict, these feeling disrespected, feeling minimized, feeling looked over, feeling whatever it might be. It's this, and that's what in ombudsing or in mediation, we are trying to help people figure out what it is they want. And we're in these relationships, right? And so how do I how do I figure out what is going on with me? What actually is my issue? And then what are the kinds of things I can imagine that will help, right? So getting away from positions to needs. And then if I need to partner with somebody else to find what is the next, how do we move forward to have this healthy work environment? And so it really is this human, no matter where you are,
Mhm.
it's humans have problems and humans are humans. Now,
Exactly.
we might come with a certain sort of set of assumptions given our culture or our age or our religion or our politics, whatever it might be. There's certain flavors right out there. Um, but at base, and I think that we're part of the human community and we do have these basic kinds of needs and desires.
Yeah, no, exactly. For the listeners, don't get me wrong. Subject matter is important.
Mhm.
Meaning, if I'm working in an academic institution or a medical institution, and people are throwing things like, "Oh, then the PI did the IRB." Do we know what that means? And it's okay to
Right.
go and ask, because I'll still to this day I'll say, "Well, this was a little embarrassing." A few years ago, I was talking with someone, and she said something like, DEI, and the way they said it didn't click. I'm like, what's DEI mean? And they're like, Reese, come on, diversity. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it just a foggy moment.
Sure.
So subject matter is important, but what I think is even more important is exactly what you're mentioning, which is the relational. It's like we're all human. We all relate to one another in the workplace. Whether again, it's governmental, medical, any field, any subject, any um, discipline. Um, And it comes back down to those needs. We all want to feel, I'm big on basic human needs. We all want to feel acknowledged, validated, recognized, respected. We want a sense of connection. We want fairness. We want autonomy. Those are the basic needs. And then the higher needs are, we want to grow, contribute, develop, evolve personally. Yeah.
Doris, when you think about
Mhm.
yourself and how you deal with conflict, have you, so you were drawn to this field. Have you always been fairly comfortable dealing with conflict, or has there been a personal evolution for yourself?
Love it. Personal evolution. I came across a quote years ago, supposed to be Tibetan, but I've never Googled it. I should and verified, but it's a beautiful quote, I think, because it basically talks about how, um, the Sherpa was helping someone climb the mountain. And so they were helping that person. So think of the mediator, the ombuds, we help people. And when they got to the top of the mountain, they realized, oh my gosh, I too have climbed the mountain. And even though that wasn't their main focus goal, it resonated with me because I'm like, ooh, I'm learning. And so going back decades, I've gotten much more comfortable. But no, in my personal life, and I share this to this day, I tell people there's something called the Thomas Kilmann inventory, TKI, and it's a simple little conflict styles. There are 5 different conflict styles, and you could avoid conflict, be kind of like a turtle. You can accommodate people. You can be like a teddy bear. You can compromise, be like what I call the fox, be a shark, be assertive, aggressive, or be the owl, which is collaborative. My default mode is turtle and shark. I avoid conflict, or I might say, hell no,
Mhm.
no, this is worth fighting for. Not physically, but
Mhm.
taking that stance. Um, but that doesn't acknowledge the full beauty of other ways of dealing with conflict.
Mhm.
And so in the workplace, I tell folks, I'm more of the fox and the owl. I help people get to compromise. If we go a step further, we collaborate. Think of that symbolic owl. They're wise, and that's what folks can be if we talk about needs. So my own evolution has been gotten more comfortable with conflict, but I'm still learning. And the moment I think, I should write a book about this, I should really, really teach full time. Life reminds me, you're not quite there yet, little grasshopper. Quick story: I have 4 daughters. My youngest one, Emily, last year, she hates it when I tell this story. Um, but we're sitting around. It's like dinner time on my laptop, and she asks a question. She's like, "Daddy, got a question." And I'm thinking, something about that tone. I'll bite. What, Emily? And she's like, at work, like you help people, right? I'm like, yes. She's like, you listen to them and you, I don't know, give them ideas or something. I'm like, yeah, that kind of pretty much is what I do. I listen, help them. And she's like, and you think you're good at it? I'm like, well, I haven't been fired yet. And she's like, so how come at home you don't listen? And so I'm like, ooh, and being the smart aleck I am, I'm like, Emily, I don't get paid at home. But internally, I'm like, note to self, Reese, that is feedback. And so kudos to her for being comfortable to playfully challenge me and me playfully challenge her back and be like, but she's right. Because my other daughters say, you listen differently at home. My wife will say, where's the ombuds? I want the ombuds right now. Not, because at home, truth be told, I go straight to action and say, okay, you've told me about the problem. You've been talking about it for 3 months. Just do this. Why don't you just do this?
Mhm.
And so it's that shark that comes out. And so I have to be more mindful and practice what I preach everywhere, not just at home, but remind myself, okay, I just got triggered by
Mhm.
the driver who cut in front of me or the person who maybe said something impolite, and great opportunities to practice
Mhm.
what we teach others.
I love that because I love it when mediators, ombuds talk about their own issues, their own continual evolution, because sometimes I think people think you learn a skill or you learn and now you have it. But it's not real. I mean, you do learn and you get better, but it
Yeah.
is, I think, a gradual, it's gradual. And I think that shows how tricky and sticky conflict is. As
Mm.
much as you can know about it and practice it and be with others and walk with them, when it's you, right? Everybody can use help. Everybody can use that neutral third to look and see what we can't see because conflict can get us all stuck. And I'm coming more and more to appreciate miscommunication in my personal life, conflicts in my personal life, because I can get comfortable sitting, listening when I'm listening to somebody else. I'm listening to their story, listening to their pain. And in my brain, I have to quiet it, but in my brain, I think, oh, just do this, oh, do this, oh, do this. And
Mhm.
and then when it's me and I'm in it, it helps me have more empathy and focus for those around me, those who visit, those who I get the privilege of being able to be a part of their lives. And it's just this constant reminders that we're all in it together, that I may not even be farther along than the people who are sitting in my
Mm.
office, but we're all in this struggle, this human struggle for connection, this human struggle for when we don't feel belonging or we do feel minimized and we feel disrespected and that we're all struggling with that. And so I'm more and more, while I don't like pain and I don't like disconnection, I now am starting to see it for the gift that it is because it can help remind me of it just helps remind me of what I need to do and how hard it is to do the simple things to move forward.
Yeah, no, undoubtedly. Oh my gosh, Mary, there's what I call gold nuggets in that. And one, there's the learning, right? And any one of us, and especially nowadays, can, watch a YouTube video, read a book, attend a workshop. There's that knowledge, but it doesn't stop there.
Mm-mm.
So I love stories and a story, even if you've not watched the movies or know the story, I tell people, remember Darth Vader and Jedis and Luke Skywalker and Yoda, and we all kind of know the story that Luke Skywalker gets taught by Yoda, and at one point he becomes a Jedi, or so he thinks, because he gets the training, and he asks Yoda, "So now I'm a Jedi," and Yoda's like, "No." He's like, in essence, what do you mean? It's like, now you got to go face Darth Vader,
Mm.
who's the evil kind of character in the movie. And so I often think of that um, analogy of like it's like that because um, we get tested daily. Things
Mhm.
conflict is normal.
Mhm.
You teach and we also acknowledge teaches like it's gonna happen. You can't control it. The only people that don't experience conflict have passed on. Otherwise, unless you're maybe meditating in a cave, up in the Himalayas. But most of us, I'm like, you experience it daily with your supervisors, your colleagues, your loved ones, family, friends, even the dog. There's this kind of back and forth. And so there is beauty, I think, in sometimes just being there for each other, even if we
Mhm.
don't know what to say or do. Meaning the temptation is to jump in and say, Mary, just do this.
Mhm.
Or like when I talk to my daughters, Brianna, you've talked about this job and, just quit. Um, but maybe that's not what they need. And what they really need is someone to be there. It's the simple story of like once upon a time, there's this little 8, 10-year-old boy. He went biking. It was safe. We're back in the 90s when kids could do this. They could go out and, and he went biking with his friend Diane. And mom started getting worried because he didn't have a cell phone. It was like, it's getting dark. Where's little Jack? And finally he showed up and she's like, where you been, Jack? And he's like, well, Diane's bike, the wheel came off. And so I was there helping her. And the mom's like, but Jack, you don't know anything about fixing a bike. And he's like, I know, but she was sad and crying. And I was just there helping her
Mhm.
in that moment. And so I think sometimes that's the best we can do
Mhm.
for people. It's just, even if we don't have answers and solutions or guidance or questions, I'm like, just being there.
Mhm.
And I don't like the word witnessing, but in a way, maybe witnessing that space with them.
Mhm.
And then if we can, maybe there is an opportunity to help them and say, via the power of questions,
Mhm.
ask questions and say, I did this today with someone, what we call a visitor, someone that comes in, meets with an ombuds. We don't call them clients, we call them visitors. With a visitor, he, she, they, I have wanted advice from the get-go. And sometimes a temptation is to tell them, like, well, just do this or that. And I acknowledge now, the reality is we have different values and
Mhm.
beliefs. What might work for me, I might just say, I'm going to let it go, or I'm going to fight this. Might not be best for you.
Mhm.
But here's what I can share, and that is the kinds of questions I'd be asking myself. Like, why does this matter so much? Why does it hurt so much? Hopefully not a physical hurt, but a
Mhm.
emotional. Maybe I feel excluded, alienated, ostracized, frustrated, disappointed, sad. There's always meaning behind emotions, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, asking questions, they can then themselves have that epiphany revelation of like, okay, this is what I need to do to face my own Darth Vader in a way.
Mhm. I love that. So, for somebody listening right now, suppose they're caught in a conflict at work,
Yeah.
what, I know we just said, and not starting with advice, but
What
what should
advice? Yeah.
somebody do if let's suppose if there is an ombuds, go visit your ombuds, but if you don't have one, what would you recommend this person do?
Yeah. No, so my rule of thumb is quite often I'll get people, visitors that come in and are very apologetic. They're like,
Mm.
Reese, I'm so sorry to take up your time. This is kind of stupid and I feel bad. And my response typically is, if you're here, it means something. And I maybe they haven't said much about the situation. So I don't know. Okay, is this some kind of harassment they're experiencing? Are they being terminated? Or is it something more like um, their colleague didn't invite them to lunch?
Mhm.
And life will go on and be okay. Um, but I want to acknowledge it's okay to feel what you're feeling, stuck, confused, whatever the emotion is, especially if it's been ongoing for a good week or two.
Mhm.
Because we've all experienced conflict. And a few days later, it's like, I don't remember why, but yeah, I got upset at Jack or Diane or my wife or my kids, or they got mad at me. And not, I honestly don't know why.
Mhm.
Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. So just via time, things naturally diffuse. But if it's been a week or two, or not uncommon, people come in, I can't sleep.
Mhm.
My blood pressure's gone up. Um, people that are literally manifesting physically
Mhm.
internal dis-ease, conflict. Then I'm like, okay, that's a big yellow flag, orange flag saying get some help.
Mhm.
Again, who that is, it could be anyone, a trusted colleague. It could be a friend. Back in 2007, when I was at UCLA, there was a gentleman named Matthew Lieberman, and he's still around, I think, but with the Neuroscience Center or Institute, and there was some great research that came out about how just talking about things helps this brain of ours relate differently to things.
Mhm.
As what happens is, as many people know, we've all heard about the fight, flight, freeze. I'm not a neuroscientist, but back in the day, lion, tiger, bear would jump out. We had nanoseconds to decide, am I going to fight it? Am I going to freeze? Or am I going to take flight? Nowadays, lions and tigers and bears are people. We say things, do things. And so we go to that reactive state of like, oh my gosh, this is a threat. My job's in jeopardy. I got feedback. I'm going to lose my job. They don't like me. I'm failing. I'm not meeting my metrics. All those negative things. And the moment we start talking with somebody,
Mhm.
we activate the PFC, prefrontal cortex, part of the brain that's on the front that helps us be more from that executive mindset framework, meaning it helps us be more rational.
Mhm.
Um, and so an ombuds can help us do that because, and I acknowledge, I tell people, not that I don't care, but I'm not vested in the outcome.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't really matter if this happens or that happens. And so because of that separation, I can maybe take a step back. And no lie, I remember years ago working with a visitor, and I'm like, question, because I don't want to make assumptions. Have you told the other person how you feel? And they looked at me like I had just delivered some sort of earth-shattering gospel knowledge. Because they're like, wow, you're brilliant. And I'm like, thank you, but give that a try and let me know. Because they had not communicated, and I forget the actual context, but basically they had an expectation, was it being met? And so they were really frustrated by it. Um, and so again, my advice to people would be one, don't wait, don't feel guilty. Conflict happens. We're there to serve you and listen and give you ideas and suggestions as far as like here are some options, and you decide, let's talk about what would that look like, and what would and again, really, I have an acronym, the word idea. And I tell folks those are the stages we go from problem to solution. I guarantee it. Any conflict will go through those stages. And I is, well, what's the issue? What's the what? What happened? Well, they said something really offensive. And then I is also, well, what's the interest, the need? Why does it matter? Help me appreciate that. Not why as in, well, why do you care? But as why as in, what did that mean? Well, reason means that someone I trusted basically, is inconsiderate about my religious beliefs, for example. D is, can we have a discussion dialogue? And that could be internal, where we self-reflect, or it could be, what do you think about inviting Jack or Diane to this conversation, your colleague? Because if we can do that, they'll have issues and interests that maybe they need to communicate. And then E, we can explore, evaluate options, ideas, and A, take action. Maybe there's an apology, and then I keep adding words. The final A, I call it acceptance and acknowledgement, meaning someone realizes, they're not going to change, or I'm not going to change. And so I just need to accept the reality. Doesn't make it fair, just means it's actually very empowering.
Mhm.
Realize, I get to choose. Mel Robbins wrote a book called The Let Them Theory.
Right.
Book is about. It's basically saying, let them and let me. The let me is the, okay, I'm empowered to say, I'm going to respond and say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to find a new opportunity, new supervisor, not associate, not talk, not share, whatever that decision might be. So again, any listener out there, I really would encourage you, if you have an ombuds, oh my gosh, use them, leverage them, make them earn their pay. If you don't, you can maybe advocate for one, but the next best thing would be a trusted colleague, friend, maybe even HR. sometimes HR can be a good resource. I know some people hesitate because they feel, well, they work for the company, right? And the reality is yes. And the way I explain it is I tell folks, well, look at it this way. They're there not to represent necessarily the manager or supervisor, but they're there to protect the institution. And so if a supervisor is doing something inappropriately, incorrectly, they'll intervene and help out. Having said that, they're not confidential. And so you have to be mindful. You have to be careful. Again, it has to be trusted. But again, I would encourage people to do something and not just stay stuck.
I really appreciate everything that you've said because as I'm listening, it just seems so reasonable and simple, and it's not complicated about first just articulating what's going on, right? And that act of articulating it to somebody else, not just being stuck in our head, like it's sort of in this darkness that happens in the forest, so we can't see what's happening. The very act of doing that to somebody else, somebody that is trusted, that is confidential, um, that can help so much, and yet we don't do that step. And it's not complicated, but it is doesn't mean it's easy, right?
Right.
It's not always easy because we know there's something wrong. We may not know exactly, and so we may not know who to or how to. But the wonderful thing about doing it is it's a process, and you can start to learn to trust yourself and you gain confidence through the act of doing it. And what you can do if there's not something that's going on for you right now, dear listener, is you could be that for somebody else, right? The time to, I think, work on conflict and networking and all this is when there isn't a problem.
Right.
So having those relationships wherever they may be, so that when, not if, but when the thing comes around, you have established those trusted relationships. And you can practice the articulation of anything. And the smaller, sometimes the better. You can get that confidence and see how it feels to say the thing. And I also, as you were talking, it reminds me of so I'm a philosopher by trade, and the Socratic method. A lot of what we're doing is not new. It's lovely to have brain science to say, oh, this is helpful. But again, the human condition, right? And so Socrates in the Socratic method is this belief that the other person has the knowledge inside of them, and the teacher or the interlocutor is there to help pull it out of them through asking questions, through helping them figure it out. And I see that's largely what this field is, right? We are not telling somebody else what to do. We are coming alongside, helping them by simply just sometimes receiving what they want to say, being that person to listen, but then asking those questions, those curious questions, so that the other person can think about something new or see it in a different kind of way so that they can explore and find. And so it's all pretty simple and very difficult at the same time.
Right. No, exactly. Because again, the tools, the what we should do, I'm like, countless books. And every now and then I'll come across a new book and someone will say, Reese, you got to read this book. It's revolutionary. And I'll look at it and I'm like, okay, I liked it. It maybe didn't resonate. I'm like, I frankly didn't feel like there was anything new,
Yeah.
And so Stephen Covey said this 30 years ago. Who? Stephen Covey. And he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And but what I love is that people repackage and maybe in their own tone or experience, someone can say, "Oh, this really resonates for me because it comes from this, say a medical perspective or maybe neuroscience perspective," which I agree, with you, Mary, in that what works, we might not know the why, and maybe the science is only now catching up. A good example is Amy Cuddy. She's the one that is out there. You can Google her name and find a YouTube video from about 10 years ago or so. And she talks about power poses and how if you stand in a specific way, like a superhero, Wonder Woman, your biochemical system changes. Cortisol goes down, testosterone goes up. You feel more confident, and good little tip to do before an interview. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's been around for decades. but the science again is only now just catching up. And you're so right about the what we need to do. I think is it's sometimes clear, but the how we do that and what's stopping us from taking action, typically that maybe there's a fear. It might be
Mhm.
because I'll ask that of people, which is, help me understand why haven't you told them that? Why haven't you communicated that? Why haven't you done that? Um, and it might be like, well, I don't want to offend them. I really value them, and they've talked about leaving the job, and so I don't want to give them the wrong message that I want them to leave, and so there's some hesitation, reservation, and until we get comfortable with going into that space,
Mhm.
especially with not only managers, but I really appreciate it when a manager reaches out. And so the scenario might be, Reese, I've got an employee, really value them, and I need to give them feedback, or I gave them feedback, they did not receive it well,
Mhm.
or I need them to do XYZ, they don't want to do XYZ. And the easy thing might be like, oh my gosh, through an HR lens, HR might say, give them a counseling memo, discipline them,
Right.
fire them, kind of like poor little Reese back in the day at Community News and Books, just chop up their head, right? And so I acknowledge, like, easy thing to do is that,
Mhm.
not be in this space. And I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying
Right.
acknowledging, thank you for being in the space. And maybe the more rewarding and definitely challenging is doing this, which is like, that D, an idea, having a discussion dialogue. Think
Mhm.
about your own personal situations where you've had to talk to maybe a loved one or a family member, and you knew it was not going to be easy. You knew it was going to be tough. Maybe tears will be shed, and maybe the end, maybe meant the end of a relationship, and maybe meant, I cannot continue this. Um, but I have to do this, you told yourself. And so being in that space and being able to navigate that, not easy. And so, yes, the more we can practice, meaning either learning from others or being there, um, helps us be prepared for when life happens. Because not to be negative, but reality is we'll experience conflict where something happens and we have to make a choice. And it could be unconscious where we retreat, ignore it, avoid it, or we can consciously choose to engage, or even maybe we choose to engage by not engaging. But if it's conscious, if you decide, I choose not to do this or have this conversation, then it's time well spent. Mm.
So I love what you're up to right now. If you would tell us about the Ombuds Academy, and I think every organization, every workplace, every worker should have access to an ombuds. I think it's the right human thing to do, and also it's good, just basic return on investment. So tell us what your this venture is that you have started.
Right. Yeah. So my new venture, side hustle, I'll call it. Oh, wait, Ombuds Academy. And what it is, it's I thought, okay, now that I've gotten a little gray in my hair in my 50s, 53 years old nowadays, um, I look back at that moment in time when I felt, gee, I don't really have any mentors, anyone
Mhm.
that can guide me in this process. And again, I mentioned I love stories, and if people are familiar with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey concept, I think the book is like the hero of a thousand masks or something. But the idea, um, kind of premises in all these wonderful little stories out there, typically you have someone that feels lost, right? I was that person back then. I wanted to be a mediator, but didn't know how. Needed some coaching, and a wizard appears in a lot of these magical stories, and they help you, guide, navigate the process. And so now that I'm a little older, I'm like, okay, not that I'm some special magical expert wizard, but I really felt led to share my experience and stories and mistakes so that people could learn from that. Because, was it Confucius that said, you can learn by knowledge or wisdom. Knowledge and experience is what you yourself experience, and it might be it takes you 5 years to get the lesson. Or wisdom is when you look at someone and say, huh, look what Reese did, that bozo, and you get the lesson immediately, and you don't have to suffer, right? Go through the pain. And so I thought, well, let me do that. Why? Because I care about the field. I care about people. I care about the profession. So let me launch this. Um, the flagship is what I'm calling Ombuds Fundamentals. It's like a 4-day workshop for aspiring or new ombuds, and you get the tools, skills, and scenarios, and you go through those. But then there's also this smaller segment I'm calling Ombuds Society, and what that is, by default, anyone who wants to join is a part of the society. It's like the mob. It's like you're in, you can leave anytime you want. But it's free offerings, and so we just had a session yesterday and talked about the 7 mistakes ombuds make and how to avoid those mistakes. And as it gets more momentum, I'll add, more sessions, monthly, and invite guest speakers and all of that. But really, it's about, I think, ultimately community and having a community for ombuds where we can, without breaking confidentiality,
Mhm.
share experiences and frustrations, because we're people too.
Mhm.
It's like leaders out there. I think we forget. We think leaders got it figured out. No, they don't.
Mhm.
All that's changed is maybe they have a fancy title, different office. Maybe they have a unique skill set. Maybe they're actually really good at it.
Mhm.
They're still human. Life happens.
Yeah. So one thing that I have been finding in this space, because a lot of times the people, of course, that we deal with are all confidential, or you're the trainer, or you're whoever you might be, is loneliness in the profession. So I'm the only ombuds. It's a new position at the university here, and there's a loneliness that I've experienced. I love the work that I'm doing. Absolutely love the university. Love the work that I'm doing. But, there isn't anybody else like me where I'm at, right? And with the confidentiality issues. So, my spouse works at the university. The person who I was in the same department with for 17 years, now I don't talk about work with my person I used to about work with. And so, I love that component of it, not only helping people figure out the lay of the land, but then once they kind of have their feet at that community
Yeah.
so that people can learn together and be together.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mary, question for you. What's your plan? What are you going to do to build that community? Because if we're feeling lonely, what's the antidote?
Well,
Oh,
yes, the
yeah.
IOA is wonderful. I've really enjoyed. I've been to 2 conferences in person. I know this year is online, and I feel like intellectually I should go, but what I have really enjoyed mostly is getting to know other ombuds are just wonderful, as you know, the kind of community. So. Um, I have a mentor from through IOA that I have been meeting with, and some other people I have met along the way. But it is a good question, right? If we find ourselves lonely, first of all, realizing that and then doing something about
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, I'm a broken record. And for those that don't know, what's a record? I'm like, a CD? What's a CD? Compact disc?
it.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what's the next best analogy? I'm on repeat. Um, about human needs, because I
Yeah.
really feel it doesn't matter where you're from, what country, your background, religion, gender, identities. We all have basic human needs. And one
Mhm.
of those is the need to connect. And so in the workplace, sometimes people feel alienated, ostracized. There's that lack of connection. And so maybe we can talk about, okay, how do you build connection within the team or in this group? And if the reality is, Reese, nope, there's too much of a click and I'm outside. These folks have worked with each other, for example, 20 years, and I just came on board 3 weeks ago. Then I say, what would it look like if you found that community outside the institution? Because you still have that need.
Mhm.
So sometimes people can say, oh, yes, through my synagogue or church or whatnot, or just friends, that's there. Because being an ombuds, yes, it's very lonely. I've been an ombuds by myself as part of a team with one other person. So I've experienced the different dynamics. And when you're by yourself, truth be told, I'm like talking to myself a lot.
Right.
Wall. Because there is that, my wife will be like, "How was your day?" And my response is like, "Well, met with people." It's like, "Well, that's really nice. What was that? What happened?" So she wants to know details. I'm like, I can't share details. Just at best, I'm like, okay, there was a person, they had a problem. No, now they feel maybe a little better. They've got a plan. And that becomes the default. But, it's not new. But again, I would highly suggest to people, whether you're an ombuds or you're in a workplace, ask yourself 0 to 10, 8, 9, 10, things are going great. What's my level of connection? Not just to the work I do, but maybe to the people, my supervisor, my colleagues. Because I guarantee it, your level of happiness will be in direct proportion to the quality of those relationships. And so think of ways of building that connection, um, and commiserating with
Mhm.
colleagues, friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Reese, our time has gotten away from us, but I have
Oh,
one
yeah.
last question for you. As you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that they'll be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think there needs to be a collective mind shift.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, if you look at the history of, and I'm not a historian, but of work, it's
Mhm.
like, why do we work 8 to 5? And it really has to do with the industrial age.
Mhm.
Like basically machines got created, and it's like, okay, now you got to make widgets, 8 to 5, work in the factory, more than that back in the day. And so it was all about production and quantity, and you had to do things, and you were told, and you had a boss. And going back to your question in the beginning of like your first initial jobs, Reese, what it taught me was, as an employee, you didn't have a voice.
Mm.
It's like you will be doing what I tell you. And I've actually had people, oh my gosh, someone he, she, they a few years ago, came in and said, "Reese, my supervisor said, look, I get paid to tell you what to do. You get paid to go do what I tell you to do." And I'm
Mm.
like, how does that feel?
Yeah.
So there needs to be a mind shift of our relationship to work, meaning, yes, there's a purpose, mission that this institution has, if it's educational or this hospital or this corporation, they're creating widgets or providing a service.
Mhm.
And maybe that's valuable for their clients and customers. And you are there to have maybe a skill set, or you have a function. But wouldn't it be great if leadership and supervisors could get curious and put on that, what I call Sherlock Holmes cap, and maybe at times say, "Mary, what do you need to really enjoy the work, or feel that your career is being propelled in the right direction, or that you're contributing, that you're growing, that you find things exciting? The work is stimulating, it's engaging,
Mhm.
the things are stable, that you don't, again, those basic human needs,
Yeah.
that you're not looking at the next opportunity, not because you want to leave, but because you have to, because financially it's like, oh my gosh, I can't make ends meet, but I love what I do. That's a
Mhm.
dilemma.
Yeah.
And for us employees to recognize it's not one way, that sometimes we have to acknowledge, okay, I need to meet some expectations, and so I would say those two things, Mary. One, mindset shift in all of us, and then two, be able more comfortable talking about expectations,
Mhm.
communicating, here's what I need or like you to do in this situation, as far as the goals and metrics and performance, and what do they call them, PKIs, key performance indicators, and uh, you know um, so yeah, and I think we're getting there.
Mm.
It's slow. Back in the 60s, there wasn't room for that. It's either, oh, you don't like it here, there's the door. 80s, we got a little bit more, wait, people have choices, they're leaving. And so, we got a whole slew of books of like how to inspire people, but it was still a they and versus us kind of mentality. And I think we're moving in the direction of, this is more of a I don't want to say symbiotic because that sounds so clinical, but it's more of a relational. The other day, remember Emily, my daughter, real quick? We were watching Alice in Wonderland on DVD. We got it from the library. But remember that story? Alice falls down the hole, and she's in this room, and she opens the little door, and she sees this beautiful garden, but she can't get through because she's too big. It's a little door, and she's got to learn the rules, the expectations, how to engage with this new reality, and then only then can she get through the door. And so I think in the workplace, we got to realize, okay, here's a big garden we get to work with, play with. But we got to cultivate people. Mm-hmm. We got to tend to it so that weeds don't grow. So yeah, I think we'll get there, hopefully, in our lifetime.
I love that. Well, Reese, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I enjoyed it too. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Reese, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. What a fun conversation. I love what you're up to. I love this Ombuds Academy. I really do believe that every organization, every worker should have access to an ombuds. And it is in organizations' best interest for their own workers to be empowered to solve their problems, as I say, early, often swiftly and justly. And so let's get more ombuds out there so that things don't escalate. And so that when things are small, we can solve them in a way that, you can solve things when they've been going on for a long time, but we want to minimize harm, right? We want to have the best work environments that we can. And so that comes with dealing with the problems as they come up. And ombuds are wonderful resources. So if you're interested in what an ombuds is, I say check out IOA, the International Ombuds Association, check out Reese's Ombuds Academy. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back, we have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you would like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, it's much appreciated. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.